Okay, can I raise a couple of points? I did go and see this site, I think, last Friday. And I think the issue that Mr. Smith has raised about the difference in levels of Badger's Copse is a very relevant thing. However, we have an appeal decision which seems to go in favour of development. And it seemed to me, looking at this, that there's perhaps very little that we can actually discuss today, because it seemed that the appeal decision focused on the issue of the relationship with the access to the garage on the other side of Botley Road, and to a certain extent on the bulk and the mass. So the question I would ask to you, Chairman, Mr. Smith, is to what extent has this scheme overcome the inspector's reasons for dismissing the appeal last time? I would also say, please don't grow, talk about yourselves, that I'm grateful for the officer mentioning public transport 3 times in this short report. I'm sure he's well aware that although buses go along Botley Road, they don't stop there. So in fact, the residents just waved at buses as they went by. They couldn't do much else. Anyway, the issue of the appeal, I think, is the important one.
Chairman, we believe it has addressed the concerns raised at the appeal. As Councillor Davies said, the actual reason for the appeal being dismissed was the effect of vehicles turning in Botley Road, and particularly those stopping directly opposite the access to the petrol filling station as well. And how they've addressed that is they've acquired an extra house on the end of that road. So the one at the western end of the road has now been acquired. That's increased the size of the site. That's allowed them to put that access in that location. And so if I can just point to the screen, Chairman, that's this property here. So they've managed effectively to push the access as far as they can along this frontage, and that's how they've avoided that conflict. So we do believe the grounds of the appeal have been addressed. I'm conscious, however, the appeal was 7 or 8 years ago now, so planning has moved on, but we believe the scheme as submitted is acceptable, and that's why we're recommending it to you, Chairman.
Well, just to come back to that, what about the relationship now between the garage exit and the entrance exit to the site?
It's probably when you're happy for me to ask State of Mind or traffic engineers to comment on directly, Chairman.
If you can visualise the site without that property on, then the site frontage would have been almost entirely along the length of the garage frontage. And so the access, I think as proposed previously, was Botley Road, which would have been the portion of the word Botley at the sort of western end of that development site, which would have been directly opposite the entrance to the filling station. And that would clearly have been a conflict point with right-turning vehicles trying to get into the filling station, get in and out of the filling station, and in and out of the site. By extending the site to the northwest, the access has now been introduced at the very northern end of the frontage, and as far as I'm concerned, it is sufficiently far now from the point at which vehicles would turn in and out of the petrol filling station.
Happy, Councillor Davies?
Going back to the Badger's Copse, it's Badger's Copse, isn't it? Yeah. Going back to that, it doesn't actually show from your picture the difference in levels, does it? Your photograph doesn't show that.
It just shows the retaining wall at the end. This is the one there, Councillor Davies. So yeah, it's difficult to see because you've got so much tree planting here, but you've automatically got a wall that's almost 6 foot high, just a retaining feature right at the foot of the site. But I estimate it's about a 5.5 metre difference between that level there where those cars are parked and Botley Road.
So those trees that are on that picture, would they disappear?
Most of the mature ones, the intention is to keep those within the layout. Let me see, I've got a plan that shows them. 3 of them are covered by preservation orders. That's 2 yew trees and an oak tree. And so if I just take it back from the other direction, so these were the trees that we were looking into the back of here. And certainly it's the applicant's intention to keep the best of those as screening within their amenity space they can't back the site.
Councillor Keegan.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, actually, I'm fully supportive of this as to paper, and the other additional suggested condition about the actual salvageable materials, I would insist that we actually put that in as well. I think that's a very useful proposition, and I hopefully you'll support it.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've probably got much choice, to be perfectly honest, with what's been said. I personally dislike it. It strikes me that Parkgate's becoming sort of flat city, to be perfectly honest. And I think the deputy was rather glib to say that people in their 80s won't be actually using cars. Well, I can't actually say what the age limit is for people going in there. So people in their 70s could well be driving cars. And of course, 18 parking spaces with all the visitors coming, is that really appropriate at the end of the day? I think probably it is, but I find it a bit doubtful. I'm happy to support the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess none of us are surprised to see the statement that they can't possibly put a brick down and make it viable if they provide any affordable housing or any contribution to affordable housing. None of us would be surprised at that. The first time, however, they actually stand the reason they can't is because they've had to overpay for the price of the property. So, in effect, the community is losing and subsidising this development. However, the more important point, as far as I'm concerned, is parking. I might tend to agree, although I understand Councillor Cartwright's point, that if we guarantee that the age profile was 80, there may well be lesser than 100% car usage. But these properties will have condition of couples or individuals. A couple could be 60 and 55. That's the limited condition of sale. And at that age, we can almost guarantee that there will be at least one car per property. So personally, I would not find the car parking proposals for this development acceptable, because there's no way of ensuring that the future occupancy would meet that upper age level at which car parking may well be restricted. So, no, I would want to see this meet our car parking standards, and it doesn't.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern is again, it's related to the car parking, is that the type of accommodation which it is, well, obviously you have staff working there. So how many of the car parking spaces will actually be taken out by staff? Or what is the number of staff that are going to be working there?
You want to answer that?
Normally only one.
That's the on-site warden and the
Yeah.
phone manager.
Yeah.
Okay. That's my question. That's your question, okay. So, Councillor Evans, are you totally against this then? Yes, I am.
As you know, Mr. Chairman, I take down parking standards seriously in terms of keeping traffic off the road, and I don't think we will. And Parkgate already suffers significantly from on-road parking, and this will just make it worse.
Lee, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I was going to ask, it might be helpful if I asked David Martin to comment again, because we've raised this very issue and asked for the applicant to give us far more details on a number of other sites that already operate, both within this borough and neighbouring boroughs. So perhaps David Martin could comment on that, Chairman.
I don't necessarily want to involve you in too many calculations and percentages and things, but the report that's been provided by Bob McDonald on behalf of the applicants has provided details from parking provision at a number of locations operated by the applicants, and those show that in each case the parking provision is less than what is proposed in proportionate terms to the application, so that fits that sort of model. The other two sets of information are parking survey results, which demand for parking. And those show that whereas the ratio that is being proposed on the site is 0.39 spaces per unit, the average from two surveys that were carried out by Churchill demonstrate that the demand is between 0.22 and 0.3 spaces of vehicles per parked per unit. So the numbers are quite well below, and there's also an additional point made in that report which just says there's no evidence from other Churchill schemes to suggest a higher parking provision would be justified. So that in a way responds to the point, well, what about all other Churchill sites? Well, that seems to satisfy that point. And we could ask for more, get more information, but I think it will only demonstrate that in this particular applicant, the demand is lower than perhaps it is for similar providers.
Thank you, Chairman. Just pick up on those 2 points. I think the mere fact that Churchill provide lower car parking in other sites is of no relevance here at all. We're looking at this site, not sites they may have elsewhere, and that we had agreed elsewhere. The second point in terms of the survey, I personally would want to see the details of the survey, and I do mean the details, which includes the age profile of the individual that was surveyed, before I would accept that.
Do we have those details to hand?
No, I think what's being provided is what they've said is the typical occupant, who I think is just under 80 and often a widow. So there's not normally that sort of demand for having a car ownership, owning a car. So that's, you know, that's all the information we have on age, or the age profile.
Just follow up on that one, Mr. Chairman. Well, of course it would, wouldn't it? Otherwise we wouldn't have seen it. I would still want to see who was surveyed and their age profile. And I don't mean a survey of existing residents in another location where they all happen to be 80. Because if they all have 80, and if the conditions of sale restricted it to, say, couples of no less than 75, I would accept the principle of this. But that's not what's restricted. The sales are restricted to couples that could be as low as 60 and 55.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think I'm persuaded by Councillor Evans' argument, and I found the passage in the report at last that says that the lease containing an age reduction restriction which ensures that only people of 60 years or over, or those of that age with a spousal partner at least 55. And I think that's exactly the point. So yes, I'll probably persuade you the other way now.
Interesting. Yeah. And I suppose we can't put an age restriction on it of 80 plus. No.
I don't think you'd be able to justify that, Chairman. No.
I tend to go along with what's being said. 60, you could have many, many more cars than 17. Is it 17 vehicles?
17 available.
17 available spaces.
I mean, if members remain concerned by it, Chairman, I would suggest the approach would be to defer the item now so we can obtain the information and bring back to the next meeting, if that's your concern. I mean, our experience is that people are going to choose this as a lifestyle choice to come and live with. This isn't like every, I'm trying to think of the best choice and careful choice of words. It's not like every other 55 or 60-year-old person, someone chooses to come and live in a complex of this type, looked after in this way with an amenity space, etc. Our experience of dealing with these schemes elsewhere is that car ownership levels are generally very, very low. They've got vast experience of this by doing these schemes across the country, and they're providing the space that's needed to meet the needs of their customers and the people that are going to live there. So I'm more than happy that if you would like to defer it, we can bring that information back to you, Chairman. I think we'll be bringing information back to you that just says what we've told you today is still the position, but I'm more than happy to do that without.
Remind me, Leah, these are not allocated spaces, they're just, it's a free-for-all.
I understand it is like we check this building, but I understand they're unallocated. Yeah, that's right.
So if you got 30, 40 tenants with cars, they just have a free-for-all on who park there, and the rest would be parking elsewhere, if that was the case.
May I address you on this point?
Yeah.
Okay, the other, Churchill produces one type of housing, and so all those other sites which have been surveyed have the same age restriction, 55 to 60, whatever it is. But their age profile is invariably, it's actually entering the development at the age of just under 80, rather than that being their average age. So despite having those lower age restrictions, that is what happens, and they've got, you know, these sites plus numerous other ones where they can demonstrate that those parking ratios work for this product, regardless of what the lower age limit is, because they simply don't get 55-year-old people in these developments. It just doesn't happen. So the parking surveys that they've applied are completely irrelevant. It's entirely the same type of housing, the same product that they're proposing here as on those other sites. And I think, David, you've looked at them, and they're fairly comparable kind of locations to this. And another thing to mention is that we've had an appeal here, and on that appeal, parking was proposed of a lower ratio, and the inspector accepted that. There was no issue with the inspector in terms of the parking provision proposed for the appeal, which had a lower ratio than we're proposing now. So it's worth bearing that in mind as well.
Councillor Parker?
Thank you, Chairman. My only point to make is, and I would probably agree with Mr. Weldon, is that it was originally appealed not on parking, and parking was accepted the first time round. If we were to be given the information and we were to look at it, I have no doubt that it will come back with exactly what has been said. But I don't feel that it is a case of declining the application on the parking, so I don't see the point in deferring.
Right. Councillor Keeble?
Chairman, for what it's worth, I've actually got 7 blocks of flats in my ward, and I regularly visit them. And one of them actually has got an age limit of 50, and there's 19 flats there. And every time I go there, there's at least well over half of those actually empty. I've been there in the morning, I've been there in the evening. And I know a lot of people actually who sort of go to work where they tend to walk out and catch the bus because it's far more convenient. And in those 7 blocks, as I've said, I've never really had a problem parking, so that's from my experience.
I can quote a similar one, Councillor Price will go along with this. Rushing House, where we insisted on a certain level of parking and then went outside the site and allocated more spaces. It's hardly ever used. So I have a tendency to think this is no different. But do you have a counter proposal, Councillor Evans?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to vote on the proposal which is here, but I will not support it.
Okay. Does anybody else want to say anything?
I have a question really, which is the 17 car parking spaces that are proposed, Mr. Chairman, could they be allocated to 17 flats and have the remaining flats be sold without any allocated parking, if that's what is the realistic, pragmatic way forward?